Hi, this is Miss Betterton, and I'm here to finish our book, Leprechaun in Late Winter, book number 43. When we finish this book, we will have read 2 entire books in the first 2 weeks of summer. Can you ever say that you've done that before? Read 2 books, chapter books, 11 chapters in each book? I don't know. That's awesome. I hope that this is a new record for you, and I hope that you're enjoying reading these books with me. Alright, so chapter 9, 10, and 11 we're going to finish today. So here we go. Chapter 9, Skunks or Weasels? Augusta, whispered Jack. She's tiny. They must have shrunk her, whispered Aine. Hide, whispered Jack. He crawled away from the door. Aine crawled after him. They pressed their backs against the grassy mound. Why are we hiding? Asked Aine. We can't let them see us, said Jack. They might shrink us too. But how are we going to save Augusta? Asked Aine. I don't know, said Jack. Hey, I just remembered something, said Aine. Didn't Mary say the girl in her story would have become small if she'd gone inside the hollow hill? Yeah, she did, said Jack. So maybe that means you can only get shrunk if you go inside. Right, said Aine. So let's go back to the doorway and call from outside. We'll be simple, direct, honest, and very polite, like Willie said. We'll tell the king and queen we've come to take our friend back to her family. But wait a minute, said Jack. How can she go back to normal life with her family if she's only 8 inches tall? Good point, said Aine. This is so weird, said Jack. Let's worry about her size later, said Aine. For now, we just have to help her escape. Right, said Jack. Let's try it. Jack and Aine crawled back to the entrance of the hollow hill and peeked inside. In the pale green light, a very small Augusta stood watching the dancers. Excuse us, please, Aine called. The drumming stopped. The dancers froze. All eyes turned to Jack and Aine. The High King and the High Queen looked startled. Who are you? The king called. How did you find us? That's not important, said Aine. We are very sorry to bother you, but we've come to get our very dear friend Augusta. We have to take her home to her very loving family. Please, thank you, added Jack, trying to sound polite. Before the king or queen could speak, Augusta rushed forward. No, I don't want to go home, she screamed in a high little voice. I don't want to leave the shade. Whoa, said Jack. That was a surprise. Maybe Augusta was under a spell. Leave here at once, the High King commanded Jack and Aine in a squeaky voice. You were not invited. You have no business here. Yes, we are leaving right away, but Augusta has to come with us, Aine called. Thank you. She's right, said Jack. Augusta has to come with us, please. Thank you. No, I want to stay here, said Augusta. I'm not good for anything at home. Mary was right. I'm not happy there. Jack was amazed. Augusta wasn't under a spell. She really wanted to stay with the Shay. The girl will stay with us, the High King shouted. Go now! Now! No way, Jack blurted out. We won't leave without Augusta. The crowd gasped. Oh, what? Roared the High King. Sorry, said Jack. I meant... You will pay for this rudeness, the king yelled. Oh, he's gone and done it now. Jack. All right. Before Jack and Aine could get away, the king thrust out his arm. Sparks flew from the tips of his tiny fingers. Suddenly, Jack and Aine couldn't move their arms or legs. The king kept pointing at them. Skunks, he shouted at the crowd, or weasels. Whoa, what's gonna happen? Neither, please, thank you, shouted Jack. He was glad he could still talk. But the crowd began chanting in strange high voices. Skunks, 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 skunks. The king nodded and raised both arms into the air. Jack was desperate. He didn't want to live in the rest of his life as a skunk. Wait, please, shouted Jack. I'm sorry, I was rude. Before you change us, I really need to tell Augusta some things. Thank you. The king looked at Jack for a long moment. Then he lowered his arms and the crowd grew silent. Thank you, said Jack. Augusta, listen to me. You should go back home. You're good for lots of things back there. You're very kind. And Mary said you have a brave heart and a fine mind. Those are really good things to have. Tears rolled down Augusta's cheeks. She shook her head. Listen to me, please, Jack went on. Mary says you're not happy, but some things do make you happy, Augusta. You said you feel close to nature. You said you love simple folk, like Mary. And I know you love stories, too. Mary said you remembered every story she told you. You used to tell them yourself, word for word. You have a great memory. He's right, Augusta, yelled Aine. Those are your gifts. You need to give your gifts to the world. Augusta was still for a moment. Then she shook her head. I want to stay, she said. You have had your stay, the High King shouted at Jack and Aine. Now, prepare to come, skunks. He raised his arms again. Oh, no, thought Jack. Wait, Minerva, said the High Queen. The High Queen stepped closer to Augusta. The Queen wore a silver cloak that glittered with diamonds. She had jewels in her long red hair that shone like stars. Her high, clear voice rang like a bell. I am Queen Aine of the Shay, she said. The boys said you love stories and that you remember every story you hear. Is this true? Augusta nodded. Then listen now to our story, said Queen Aine. All the Shay were very still, watching Augusta and their queen. In the morning of time, out of a rosy sky and a windy light we came, said Queen Aine. We were tribes of a supernatural people called the Tuatha De Danann. Strong, fearless, and noble we were. 5 roads carried our armies through the wild, wooded lands of Ireland, and for eons we ruled the Irish world. But when the humans came, the wild woods gave way to villages and pastures. Our tribes hid in the hollow hills, in ruined forts, and under the sea. Over time, we made ourselves smaller and smaller so we could more easily hide from the humans. Eventually, we became known as the Shay, and we were mocked as the wee folk of fairy. But in truth, we are a tribe of the great Tuatha De Danann, and we live in enchanted places like this one, protected by what is left of our magic. Do you understand? I do, yes, breathed Augusta. Our stories were passed down for centuries in the old language of Ireland, but as the old language was replaced with English, the stories began to fade away, Queen Aine said. Go home now with your friends, human child. Go back for our sake. Seek out the old storytellers and ask them to tell you the tales of my people. Learn the old language. Read the old manuscripts. Write our stories down and share them before they are lost completely. Share them with all the people of Ireland and all the world. Will you do that for us? Will you use your gifts to tell our stories and restore our dignity? Augusta's eyes shone. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. Yes. Good, then I will send you all swiftly home, said Queen Aine. She beckoned to be a small dancer who stepped forward with a tiny silver chalice. Sip the honey nectar of the Shay, said the High Queen. She took the chalice and held it out to Augusta. Augusta took a sip. A second later, Jack felt cold wind and rain. He and Aine were standing on the bank of the river. Augusta was standing beside them. She was her normal size again. Whew, that was a close one. All right, chapter 10, Fare Thee Wells. Well, that was simple and direct, said Aine. Yeah, Jack felt dazed. Augusta looked at Jack and Aine. I saw them, she said with her eyes wide. I finally saw the Shay. I really saw them. She burst out laughing. Her laughter was so full of joy that Jack and Aine started laughing too. I saw them, I saw them, Augusta kept repeating. I saw the Shay, and now I have important things to do. Yes, you do, said Aine. I must learn the old language, and I must start gathering stories at once. That's what Queen Aine told me, said Augusta. I can't wait to visit the old storytellers. There's Mary Sheridan and Biddy Early, too. I'll start with Mary. Let's go see her right now. Hurry. Will you come with me? Hurry. Sure, said Aine, but just a second. She turned to Jack. What about Willie? Who's Willie? Asked Augusta. A friend of ours, said Jack, looking around. He said he'd wait for us. But where was he going to wait? Willie? Willie? Called Annie. I guess he's still somewhere on the other side of the river, said Jack. That's too bad, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. Come, let us go see Mary now, said Augusta, grabbing Annie's hand and pulling her along. Jack looked around for Willie one last time. He was sad about not seeing the leprechaun again, but he was still a little relieved, too. He knew they couldn't keep their part of the deal, teaching Willie how to play the magic whistle. Come on, Jack, cried Augusta. Jack followed the two girls through the wet meadow, over the stone wall, down the dirt lane, and across the muddy field to Mary Sheridan's cottage. Mary! Mary! Augusta called. She dashed ahead of Jack and Annie. She didn't even stop to knock. She threw open the door to the cottage. Oh, she said, freezing in her tracks. Jack and Annie caught up with Augusta and looked inside. Mary was sitting in front of her fire. Next to her was a small man wearing a green jacket and a three-cornered red cap with a white feather. Willie! Cried Annie. Annie and Jack hurried past Augusta into the cottage. You're here, said Jack. Of course. I said I'd wait for you, said the leprechaun. I see you found your dear friend and brought her home. Good work. Augusta stood in the doorway, gaping at Willie. Who are you? She asked. Name's Willie, just plain Willie, said the leprechaun. I usually leave before you visit Mary, but now that you've seen the Shay, I suppose there's no point in hiding from you any more. And Augusta. Are you real? Asked Augusta. Who knows, said the leprechaun. Maybe I'm real and you're not. Depends on which one of us is asking the question. Everyone laughed. Good point, said Annie. Well, we'd better be getting home, said Jack. He wanted to leave before Willie asked Annie for his whistle lesson. Jack took Annie's hand and started backing toward the door. Thanks for helping us, Willie, he said. Yeah, and thanks, Mary, for everything, said Annie, waving. Goodbye, Augusta. Goodbye, everyone. Wait just a minute, my friends, said Willie. Uh-oh, thought Jack. Have you forgotten our deal? Said Willie. My fingers are itching to make beautiful music for Mary. Well, you see, there's a problem with that, said Jack, squirming. A frown crossed Willie's face. A problem? He said. How could there be a problem? Find your friend, teach Willie to play the whistle. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Right, said Jack. So what's the problem? Asked Willie. Well, the whistle... Jack didn't know how to finish. I'll answer that question, said Annie. Willie, I'm going to be simple and direct and honest with you. Yes, said the leprechaun. Merlin the magician gave us the whistle to help us on our mission, said Annie. The whistle is magic, and the magic only works once. Without the magic, I don't really know how to play, so I can't teach you. There, you have it. Ah, said Willie. He looked at the floor and shook his head. Then I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn you both into chipmunks. What? Said Jack. Willie burst out laughing. Joking, only joking, he said. Merlin, you should have told me you were friends with Merlin in the first place. Do you know Merlin? Asked Jack. Oh yes, we spent a great deal of time together. Must be about 800 years old now, said Willie. How is he? He's happy, said Annie. Good. Willie turned back to Mary and Augusta. I first met the master magician on the Isle of Merlin in the Irish Sea. Wait, please, Willie, said Augusta. Mary, do you have pen and paper? No, my dear, I'm afraid I don't, said Mary. I can help, said Jack. He took his pencil and small notebook out of his pocket. He tore some clean pages out of the notebook. Then he gave the pencil and pages to Augusta. There, he said. Oh, thank you, Jack, said Augusta. She turned back to Willie. Continue, please. Well, said Willie, Merlin was only a few centuries old then, and I was a mere lad. As Willie told his story, Augusta began to write. Jack put his notebook back into his pocket and nodded to Annie. She nodded back, and the two of them started toward the door. Just as they were about to leave, Annie called out to the others, Bye! We have to go home now, said Jack. Trip lightly, said Willie. Thank you for everything, said Augusta. 1 and 20 fare thee wells, said Mary. Same to you guys, said Jack. Then he and Annie slipped out of the cottage. The rain was pouring again and the wind was blowing hard. I think we inspired Augusta, said Annie. Yep, we accomplished our mission, said Jack. Now let's get out of here. He couldn't wait to go home and get warm and dry. Jack and Annie ran against the wind. They climbed over the stone wall, then hurried down the lane, slipping and sliding in the muck. They ran across the soaked field. By the time they arrived at the rope ladder, their clothes were caked with mud. Jack and Annie climbed into the treehouse. Annie found the Pennsylvania book in the corner. As rain blew through the window, she pointed to a picture of the Frog Creek woods. I wish we could go there, she said. The wind blew harder. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 11 is Lady Gregory. Ah, sunshine, said Jack. He closed his eyes and felt the sunshine streaming through the treehouse window. And clean, dry clothes, murmured Annie. She placed the Pennsylvania book back in the corner. Jack took the magic whistle out of his pocket and placed it next to the book. There, let's go home now, he said. I want to look on the internet for information about Augusta. He started down the rope ladder. Great idea, said Annie, following Jack. We can find out what happened to her. Jack and Annie ran through the chilly Frog Creek woods. They crossed the street and hurried up the sparkling sidewalk to their yard. They tramped over old snow up to their porch. Annie opened the front door and led the way inside. Hi, Jack called. We're back. Hi, their mom called from the kitchen. Did you have a nice break? Yes, we did, said Annie. Good, get back to your homework now, said their mom, so you can finish in time to go to the theater. Okay, called Annie. She went to the computer desk and sat down. What should I type? She asked Jack. Jack pulled up a chair and sat beside her. Well, we don't know her last name, he said, so try Galloway, Augusta, and Irish stories. Annie typed these words on the keyboard, then hit enter. There were lots of choices for different websites. Annie clicked on the first one. On the screen was a black and white photograph of a woman. The caption under it said, Lady Augusta Gregory. Look, it's her, said Annie. The woman on the screen was middle-aged, but she still looked like Augusta. Her hair was parted neatly down the middle. Jack read aloud from the screen. Lady Augusta Gregory was born into a wealthy family in Galway, Ireland in 1852. She wrote over 40 plays and many poems and essays. She was a co-founder of the Abbey Theatre, and she was the National Theatre of Ireland. Lady Gregory also learned the old language of Ireland and became well known for collecting Irish stories and legends and sharing them with the world. Wow, said Annie. Augusta did have a brave heart and a fine mind, and she must have liked our play, since she wrote 40 of her own and started her own theater. Here is a picture of Augusta that they found on the internet. Yeah, said Jack, she really turned out great. This reminded him of a question he'd asked himself earlier. I wonder what I'm good for. I didn't know how to do anything on that Irish farm. Me neither, said Annie. But hardly any kids today know how to do that kind of stuff. So what would we do if all our machines and computers broke down, said Jack. We'd have to figure out how to grow potatoes and make our own clothes and milk cows, said Annie. I'd probably read some kind of instructions first and give it a try, said Jack. I'd probably give it a try first, said Annie, then read the instructions. Jack laughed. I know some stuff we're good for, said Annie. What? Said Jack. First, we're good for helping each other, said Annie. Yeah, but, said Jack. No, really. We help each other all the time, said Annie. That's true, said Jack. And we're good for helping Augusta, said Annie. And helping Louis Armstrong, Mozart, and Leonardo da Vinci. We put the smile on Mona Lisa's face, remember? Jack nodded. Yep, he said. And we're good for saving an orphaned penguin, a huge octopus, and the cities of Tokyo, Venice, and New York, said Annie. We're good for rescuing a baby gorilla from a leopard and school kids from a twister. We're good for helping Shakespeare, Clara Barton, and George Washington. We're good for rescuing 2 kids from a tsunami, a Lakota boy from a buffalo stampede, and a baby kangaroo and a koala from a forest fire. We're good for... Wait, stop, said Jack. Stop. But that's not even half of it, said Annie. I know, said Jack, but that's plenty. I'm inspired. I'm ready to write that story for homework. I'll use my own experience. I've a little more than I thought. Cool, said Annie. She went back to reading about Lady Gregory on the computer. Jack grabbed a pencil and pulled out his notebook. He moved to the couch and sat down. As late winter light slanted into the living room, he began to write. Here's a picture of Jack writing. That's the end. Now, as always, in the back of these Magic Treehouse books, there's extra and neat facts, interesting facts, more facts about whatever that subject was. So remember, this has Irish fairies, Lady Gregory, Irish language. The Irish language back in the 1600s, the 1900s was called Irish Gaelic, and it was replaced by English in many parts of Ireland. So that was the old language that she had defined. I have so enjoyed reading this book with you, and I can't wait to start reading this book, A Ghost Tale for Christmas Time, book number 44. Go get it and be ready to read with me, and I'll see you soon. Thank y'all.